Have you ever thought about how small part of the world we are? Other people shape most of our actions and thoughts. We read their books, we speak their languages, we obey their laws, and we buy their products. All of our behaviors are reflections of other people's actions and decisions. Now, thinking like this, you start to ask yourself questions like, how can I ever be unique if everything I do is merely a product of the circumstances I live within and the people around me creating them? And how will my actions alone ever be able to have an impact on society? Now, these are all very big and important questions that I'm sure we all have thought about at one point in our lives or another. And they generally have a very sad or negative meaning when we think about them. So what I'm going to do tonight is to try to prove you wrong and prove us wrong. But before reflecting upon those further, I would like to paint you a picture. Imagine life as a puzzle. Now, think of every person in your life as a piece in that puzzle. For every new person you meet, a new piece is added. For every year that passes by, you get into many new situations and you meet great amounts of new people, all of these helping to form the picture of your life, setting up the scene or creating the circumstances for the events to come, whether it is to meet a friend, go to a concert, or to start university. So living like this, you're constantly adding more pieces to your puzzle, so it's constantly growing. And thus, the picture of your life is constantly evolving. Now, does everybody understand this? Cool. So, now that I've explained this, I'm going to share with you two of my own experiences and how they have changed the pieces in my puzzle. The first experience I'm going to share with you is the year after I graduated from upper secondary school. Now, when I finished upper secondary school, I thought I was going to become an engineer. However, that plan crashed quite quickly, as I didn't get into the university I wanted to, because I had too poor math grades. Now, having lost my only plan, I suddenly stood in front of the biggest challenge in my life so far, to create my own living without a solid institution like a school or university backing me up. So I was afraid that this was going to be a very crazy and erratic year, and indeed it turned out to be just like that. So when I graduated upper secondary school, I started working at an industrial bakery over the summer. From that, I went to being an art student at a university in Stockholm, Sweden. Then, from that, I went to working with business development at Coca-Cola. And from that, I went to working as a chef at a kindergarten, cooking for 120 kids, and getting fired. Now, that's another story, but what I can tell you is that it involves me slightly bending the truth about my experience to get in some cash and to get something to do, and also a couple of burnt meals. You might wonder why I have Gordon Ramsay here on my presentation. It's not like I got a hubris or think like, oh, I'm such a good chef. Obviously, I got fired, but it's because if he would have been there, I would have been just as burnt at the meals as I was trying to cook. So, whoops. As you can hear, something urged me to constantly change my life. I opened up new opportunities and careers all the time, but everything without any particular purpose, but to push my own boundaries to the max. And even though I constantly challenged myself, I never worked towards a clear vision or a goal. So instead of following my actions through and stick with one thing, I kept on changing the circumstances in which I lived and worked, so I constantly had to reform the puzzle of my life and recreate the puzzle of my life. So this was the first experience I wanted to tell you about. Now, the lesson I learned from this year is a very cheesy one, but nevertheless important. Things never turn out as you expect them to. Cheesy, I know, but it makes sense. Because at the beginning of this year, I thought I knew exactly how the next piece in my puzzle was going to look. I thought I knew exactly how my future was going to be. And when it didn't turn out as I expected it to, I got confused and thought that coincidences and bad luck had thrown me between all these different challenges and situations. I always seemed to get into situations which were wrong in the sense that I was discontent with the circumstances in which I lived. And so I naturally blamed them for constantly having to recreate the puzzle of my life. So this was the first experience and the first lesson I wanted to tell you about. Now we're going to move on to the next one, which is conveniently the following year. This year, in contrast to the previous one, I decided to take on something where I knew exactly what I could expect. So I became a squad leader in the army. Now, even though I knew pretty much what I could expect from it, it still taught me two important lessons. It gave me two important realizations that I otherwise wouldn't have gotten. Firstly, discovering the impact of an individual's actions on the bigger group indirectly gave me a deeper understanding of what happened to me the year before. How my actions affected those around me and set the scene, or circumstances, if you will, for all those events that happened to me, all those different jobs and occupations. Secondly, and perhaps most importantly here, it awakened my passion to explore the concept of leadership. So as you can imagine, there are some differences between leading a team at a normal job and leading a group of 10 soldiers. So the first thing I learned here was really to be solid and take ownership of myself. Now, what I mean by that is that I learned to be confident, I learned to stand my ground, and I learned to take tough decisions, and always be responsible for everything I did and its consequences. Here the challenge was to be my own, to create my own space, and be organized both in my actions and thoughts, whilst being in a major chaos 24 hours a day. And here, again, it became clearer than ever how one individual's actions ripples out onto the larger group. In the army, there were no such thing as coincidences or to blame the circumstances. Instead, we learned on how to capitalize on them and how to make the best out of a situation. And it was here that I understood, through working so close together with that team, that even the smallest action from one individual will affect the whole group. And so the circumstances around you will always change, even if a little. And I can only assume that the same applies to society as well. So through my increased understanding of my impact on those around me, I suddenly became aware of my actions. And I suddenly could explain many of the events that I before would have considered as mere coincidences produced by certain circumstances. And it was through this realization that I first understood the power of leadership. How we as individuals affect those around us, and how we have the power to shape the pieces of the puzzles of the people surrounding us. Now, seeing this, I realized that it is almost impossible to achieve anything alone, really. Don't misunderstand me here, this is not a negative thing. No, this perfectly illustrates what a great opportunity our surroundings gives us to unlock our full potential as humans, leaders, and positive catalysts in society. So, with this in mind, going back to the questions that I posed in the beginning, how will I ever be unique if everything I do is merely a product of the circumstances I live within and the people around me creating them? And how will my actions alone ever be able to have an impact on society? And looking back at these questions with the experiences I've told you about in the back of the head, realize that they are no longer sad or negative. Because I realized that if other people hadn't shaped my thoughts, I would probably have been in Stockholm right now, living at my parents' place, have bad confidence because of my poor math skills, and I wouldn't have been able to keep up with engineering classes. If I hadn't learned to speak other people's languages, I would never have been able to move to the UK. I would never have the opportunity to study here at this university, and I would never have the opportunity to stand here today. So, just to show to you that this doesn't only apply to me, it applies to all of us, I'd like to subject all of you to a simple thought experiment in the context of leadership. So why do I want to do this in the context of leadership? Because leaders have an immense impact on society and its framework, and they set the circumstances or the scene for the big majority of us. So, here it goes. think of your favorite president or prime minister. Now, think of the leadership qualities that you think makes him or her worthy of their leadership label. Then ask yourself, are these qualities only emanating from his or her being, that is, were he or she born with these qualities, or are they also the fruits of all the people surrounding them, helping them out behind the scenes, solving their problems, and helping them to unlock their full potential? Now, the answer here is pretty clear, right? Of course, other people contributed to their success. These leaders' success, just like yours and mine, evolved from their education, experiences, and personalities in combination with the social context in which they live and lived. So, seeing this, if other people impact us to this extent, it also means that we have an equal opportunity to impact those around us. So, hence the real question here is not if we should make an impact, but how we should make our impact. So, to wrap up, I've talked about some of the challenges I've faced myself. We have explored the boundaries that our circumstances can put upon us and how we can unlock ourselves from them. We also know that it's a matter of how and not if we can use those around us to unlock ourselves from the conception of circumstances as a constraint and instead change them to our own benefit. So, now, where does all this lead us? Conveniently, it leads us back to the puzzle. You might already have realized it, but we are all part of one big puzzle. And we already had a great impact in shaping many other people's lives, one piece at a time, one action at a time. Thus, in the aspect of combining the puzzle with the idea of leadership, we realize that in fact all of us are leaders, because we all have the means to affect those around us, and we all have the power to shape the pieces of the puzzle surrounding us. And that is why it's so important for us to become aware of how we change those pieces and how we impact those people around us. Every new situation, every new meeting you might experience, every coincidence or not, is a result of an action. Therefore, we have to see that all of us are shapers of the puzzles in different aspects and areas. We have to realize that we will always make a change, even through our smallest decisions. Our lives will always be changed in the reflection of other people's decisions. And so we will always be catalyzed, and we will always be catalysts. We should not let big decisions rule our lives. There's a famous expression for this, which is don't put all eggs in one basket. And many of the speakers here have talked about that today as well. And that's correct. Instead, we should let the small things matter. I'm sure that many of your friends have had an immense impact on your lives. But I'm also sure that it wasn't a big decision for you to become friends with them, or for them to become friends with you. So instead of blaming the circumstances or thinking about how to be unique or how to alone stand out and impact society, we should become aware of our actions, we should take control of them, and we should lead ourselves to where we want to be. Doing this, we will realize that many of the boundaries in our lives we thought were set by the circumstances, we can in fact change, push, and pass. By first taking leadership over ourselves, and then positively impact those around us. One man caught the essence of this in a very famous quote. This man was a great leader that, through acting out his love and kindness, changed the circumstances for first himself, then those around him, and eventually for a whole country. And it is with this quote from this man I'd like to finish my presentation here. The man was Mahatma Gandhi. The quote was, "Be the change you wish to see in the world." Thank you very much.